The gentle patter of raindrops against your window, the soft whisper of wind through autumn leaves, the distant rumble of thunder rolling across a sleepy town. These are the sounds that have lulled humanity to sleep for thousands of years, and tonight they're calling to you once again. Welcome to a world where midnight rain becomes your personal symphony, where cozy tales unfold like warm blankets around your weary mind, and where the deepest, most restorative sleep awaits just beyond the next gentle story. I'm here to guide you through an evening of pure tranquility, where each word is carefully chosen to ease your thoughts, and each tale is crafted to carry you softly into dreams. But here's something most people don't realize about sleep. It's not just about closing your eyes and hoping for the best. The quality of your sleep, the depth of your rest, the very dreams that dance through your mind, all of these depend on how you prepare your consciousness for the journey ahead. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together tonight. You see, there's a reason why the sound of rain has been nature's lullaby since the beginning of time. It's not just pleasant background noise. Rain creates what scientists call pink noise, a specific frequency that actually synchronizes with your brain waves, naturally guiding your mind from the active beta state of wakefulness into the gentle alpha waves of relaxation, and eventually into the deep theta rhythms of peaceful sleep. Tonight, I'm not just going to tell you stories. I'm going to weave together a tapestry of sound and narrative that speaks directly to your subconscious mind, using techniques that have been perfected over centuries of storytelling tradition. Each tale has been carefully selected and crafted to work with your natural sleep cycles, creating a seamless bridge between your waking world and the realm of dreams. Picture this. You're nestled in your most comfortable space, perhaps under a favorite blanket that holds the familiar scent of home. Outside, the world is transforming under a gentle midnight rain. Streets glisten like mirrors, reflecting streetlights. Gardens drink deeply from the sky's generous gift. And somewhere in the distance, a clock tower chimes the late hour, its melody mixing with the rhythm of raindrops on rooftops and leaves. This isn't just any ordinary evening. This is a night designed for deep rest, for the kind of sleep that restores not just your body, but your very soul. The kind of sleep that allows your mind to process the day's experiences, to file away memories, and to prepare for tomorrow's possibilities. The kind of sleep that great-grandmothers knew how to summon with their gentle voices and timeless tales. But what makes tonight special isn't just the rain or the stories. It's the way these elements work together to create something magical. You see, when we combine the natural white noise of rainfall with carefully crafted narratives, something extraordinary happens in your brain. The analytical part of your mind, the part that's been working hard all day, begins to quiet down. Meanwhile, the creative, intuitive part of your consciousness starts to take over, opening doorways to deeper states of relaxation. I've spent years studying the art of sleep-inducing storytelling, learning from ancient traditions where village elders would guide their communities into restful nights with tales that seemed to flow like gentle rivers. These weren't just stories for entertainment. They were tools for healing, for processing emotions, for finding peace in an often chaotic world. Tonight, you're going to experience 3 distinct types of tales, each designed to work with different aspects of your mind's journey towards sleep. First, we'll begin with stories that gently slow your racing thoughts, tales that feel like soft conversation with an old friend. These narratives will help your mind release the tensions and concerns of the day, creating space for deeper relaxation. Then, as your breathing naturally deepens and your muscles begin to soften, we'll move into stories that engage your imagination in the most soothing way possible. These tales will paint pictures in your mind's eye, but not the kind that excite or stimulate. Instead, they'll create gentle, flowing images that feel like watching clouds drift across a peaceful sky. Finally, as you approach the threshold of sleep, we'll explore stories that speak directly to your subconscious mind, narratives that your conscious awareness might barely follow, but that your deeper self will embrace like a warm embrace. These are the tales that will carry you across the bridge from wakefulness into the healing realm of dreams. Each story tonight has been tested and refined, not just for entertainment value, but for its ability to create the specific mental state that promotes deep, restorative sleep. Some draw from the gentle wisdom of nature, others from the quiet magic of everyday moments transformed by moonlight and rain. All of them share one common thread. They're designed to slow down time, to create a pocket of peace in your busy life, and to remind you that rest isn't just a necessity, but a gift you can give yourself. And here's something beautiful about tonight's journey. As you listen to these tales, you might find that your own memories begin to surface, gentle recollections of rainy nights from your past, moments of comfort and safety that your mind has carefully preserved. This isn't a coincidence. The stories I've chosen tonight are designed to awaken your own inner library of peaceful experiences, creating a personalized soundtrack of tranquility that's uniquely yours. It's yours. You might remember falling asleep to the sound of rain on your childhood bedroom window, or perhaps a cozy evening spent reading by lamplight while storms passed safely outside. Maybe you'll recall the feeling of being tucked into bed with a favorite blanket, or the sound of gentle voices in another room, creating a cocoon of safety around your dreams. These memories aren't just nostalgic moments, they're powerful tools for relaxation, pathways back to states of peace and security that your body and mind remember perfectly. Tonight's stories will gently guide you back to these feelings, but with the wisdom and perspective of your current self. As we begin this journey together, I want you to know that there's no pressure to stay awake for every word, no test at the end, no need to remember every detail. In fact, the moment you feel yourself drifting towards sleep, I encourage you to let go completely. These stories are designed to work, whether you're actively listening or allowing them to flow through your subconscious like a gentle stream. The rain outside your window tonight isn't just weather. It's nature's way of washing the world clean, of preparing the earth for new growth, of creating the perfect conditions for rest and renewal. And that's exactly what we're going to do together over the next hour. We're going to wash away the residue of the day, prepare your mind for peaceful dreams, and create the perfect conditions for the kind of sleep that transforms not just your night, but your tomorrow. So take a deep breath now. Feel your body settling into whatever comfortable position you've chosen, and let the gentle sound of rain become the foundation for everything that follows. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and prepare to embark on a journey that will carry you safely through the night and into the most restful sleep you've experienced in a long time. The first tale begins now, emerging from the rhythm of raindrops, like a whispered secret shared between old friends on a night when the whole world seems wrapped in velvet darkness and gentle dreams. In a small village, nestled between rolling hills and whispering forests, there lived a clockmaker named Elena who had discovered something extraordinary about the relationship between time and sleep. Her workshop sat at the edge of town, where the cobblestone streets gave way to wildflower meadows, and where the sound of rain on her tin roof created the most perfect rhythm for her delicate work. Elena had always been fascinated by the way time seemed to slow down during rainfall. She noticed that on rainy nights, people walked more slowly, spoke more softly, and seemed to carry themselves with a gentle deliberation that was absent on clear evenings. This observation led her to create something truly special: clocks that didn't just mark time, but that helped time flow like honey, thick and golden and deeply satisfying. The secret, she discovered, lay not in the mechanism itself, but in the way the clock's gentle ticking could synchronize with a person's heartbeat, gradually slowing it down until both clock and heart found the perfect rhythm for rest. Each clock she crafted was unique, tuned to create a specific frequency that seemed to whisper to the soul, "It's time to let go now. It's time to rest." On this particular evening, as autumn rain began its nightly dance across the village rooftops, Elena was putting the finishing touches on her most ambitious creation yet. This wasn't just a clock, but an entire symphony of gentle sounds designed to guide anyone who heard it into the deepest, most restorative sleep imaginable. The clock stood nearly as tall as Elena herself, its wooden case carved from driftwood that had been smoothed by years of ocean waves. Inside, instead of traditional gears and springs, Elena had created a system of tiny bells, each one tuned to a different note in what she called the sleep scale. When the clock chimed, it didn't simply announce the hour. Instead, it created a cascade of sounds that seemed to flow like water, each note dissolving into the next, until the entire melody became a gentle river of tranquility. As Elena worked, she found herself thinking about her customers, the people who would eventually bring these clocks into their homes. There was Mrs. Chen, who had been struggling with insomnia since her husband passed away, lying awake night after night, listening to the empty silence where his breathing used to be. There was young Thomas, whose mind raced with worries about school and friendships, unable to quiet his thoughts long enough to find peace. And there was the elderly gentleman who visited her shop every week, not to buy anything, but simply to sit in the corner and listen to the gentle ticking of her various timepieces. Each of these people carried their own unique relationship with sleep, their own barriers to rest, their own need for the kind of deep healing that only comes when consciousness finally surrenders to the embrace of dreams. Elena understood this because she had once been unable to sleep herself, her mind churning with the endless complexities of her craft, with designs that wouldn't quite work and mechanisms that refused to cooperate. The solution had come to her during a particularly heavy rainstorm 3 years ago. She had been working late, frustrated with a clock that kept losing time, when she suddenly realized she was no longer fighting the mechanism. Instead, she was moving in harmony with the rain outside, her hands working in rhythm with the drops against her window. The clock, as if sensing this change in her approach, began to keep perfect time. That night, Elena slept better than she had in months, and when she woke, she understood something profound about the relationship between rhythm, repetition, and rest. The human mind, she realized, was not meant to be constantly alert and analytical. It needed permission to slow down, to synchronize with gentler rhythms, to find its way back to the natural cycles that had governed human sleep for millennia. From that moment on, Elena began creating clocks that didn't just tell time, but that taught time to move more gently. She studied the way raindrops fell, not in a steady stream, but in clusters and pauses, creating natural patterns that the ear found deeply satisfying. She observed how her own breathing changed when she listened to certain sounds, how her heartbeat would gradually slow to match the rhythm of gentle music. All of this research had led to tonight's creation, a clock that incorporated not just the gentle chiming of bells, but the sound of rain itself. Elena had spent months perfecting a system of tiny channels and chambers within the clock's case, where water could flow in patterns that mimicked natural rainfall. When the clock chimed each hour, it wasn't just marking time passing, but creating a moment of profound peace, a reminder that rest was not only possible, but essential. As she adjusted the final bell, Elena noticed that the rain outside had intensified, creating a steady rhythm against her workshop windows. She smiled, knowing that somewhere in the village, people were already beginning to feel the effects of the storm, their minds naturally beginning to slow, their bodies preparing for the night's rest. The clock's first chime surprised even Elena with its beauty. The sound seemed to emerge from the very air itself, starting as a whisper and growing into a gentle song that seemed to harmonize perfectly with the rain outside. As the chimes continued, she felt her own breathing deepen, her shoulders relax, her mind begin to quiet in ways that felt both familiar and completely new. She thought about the journey each of her customers would take with this clock, how it would become part of their nightly routine, a signal to their minds and bodies that it was time to release the day's tensions and embrace the healing darkness of sleep. The clock wouldn't just tell them when to sleep, but would actively guide them into deeper states of rest, creating the perfect conditions for the kind of dreams that refresh and restore. As the final chime faded into the sound of rain, Elena realized that she had created something far more powerful than a simple timepiece. She had crafted a bridge between the waking world and the realm of dreams, a gentle guide that would help people find their way back to the natural rhythms that modern life had taught them to ignore. The clock stood ready now, its wooden case gleaming in the lamplight, its inner mechanisms perfectly aligned to create the symphony of rest that would soon fill someone's bedroom with the promise of deep, healing sleep. Elena covered it carefully with a soft cloth, knowing that tomorrow she would deliver it to its new home, where it would begin its true work of helping another soul find peace in the gentle embrace of midnight rain and cozy dreams. Outside Elena's workshop, the rain continued its ancient rhythm, each drop adding to the growing symphony that would soon carry the village into sleep. But across town, in a small apartment above the baker's shop, someone else was discovering their own relationship with the night's gentle sounds. Sarah had always been what her grandmother called a night owl, someone whose mind seemed to come alive just as the rest of the world was settling down. While others found peace in the evening hours, Sarah's thoughts would begin to race, replaying conversations from the day, planning tomorrow's tasks, worrying about decisions she'd made or hadn't made yet. Sleep, for her, had become something to chase rather than something to welcome. Tonight felt different, though. As she sat by her window with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the rain create rivulets down the glass, Sarah found herself thinking not about tomorrow's responsibilities, but about the stories her grandmother used to tell during storms like this one. Stories that seemed to slow time itself, creating pockets of peace in what had often felt like a chaotic childhood. Her grandmother had possessed an almost magical ability to transform any evening into an adventure, any rainy night into an opportunity for wonder. She would sit in her old rocking chair, the one that creaked in perfect rhythm with her gentle voice, and spin tales that seemed to come from some deep well of wisdom that Sarah had never fully understood until now. The rain, her grandmother would say, is the earth's way of whispering bedtime stories to all the growing things. Every drop carries a message of rest, of renewal, of the promise that tomorrow will bring fresh possibilities. Sarah had thought these were just pretty words then, but tonight, watching the rain paint patterns on her window, she began to understand what her grandmother had really been teaching her. Sleep wasn't something to be conquered or achieved through force of will. It was something to be invited, welcomed, allowed to arrive in its own time and its own way. The rain outside wasn't just weather, it was nature's own lullaby, a reminder that rest was as natural as breathing, as essential as the water that nourished the earth. As Sarah sipped her tea, she noticed how the warm liquid seemed to slow her thoughts, how the gentle steam rising from her cup created its own small weather system, its own miniature cycle of evaporation and condensation. Everything, she realized, was connected to everything else in ways that her busy mind usually missed. The rain outside, the steam from her tea, the gentle rhythm of her own breathing, all part of the same infinite cycle of rest and renewal. She thought about Elena, the clockmaker she'd heard so much about but never met. People in the village spoke of Elena's clocks with a kind of reverence, describing them not just as timepieces, but as instruments of peace. Sarah wondered what it would be like to have one of those clocks in her bedroom, to fall asleep to the sound of gentle chimes that seemed to understand the secret language of rest. But even without Elena's clock, Sarah was beginning to discover her own pathway to sleep. The rain outside had become her teacher, showing her how to let go of the day's tensions, one drop at a time. Each rivulet on her window glass seemed to carry away a worry, a fear, a piece of the mental static that usually kept her awake long into the night. The apartment around her seemed to respond to the rain's influence as well. The familiar creaks and settling sounds that usually made her feel restless now felt like a gentle conversation between the building and the storm. The radiator's gentle hiss became a whisper of warmth and comfort. Even the distant sound of cars moving through wet streets seemed to join the evening's symphony of tranquility. Sarah set down her empty teacup and moved to her bedroom, where she had prepared what she privately called her sleep sanctuary. Soft pillows arranged just so, a blanket that had been her grandmother's, a small lamp that cast warm, honey-colored light across the room. Tonight, for the first time in months, this space felt not like a battlefield where she struggled with insomnia, but like a haven where rest was not only possible, but inevitable. As she settled into bed, Sarah found herself naturally synchronizing her breathing with the rain's rhythm, in with the gentle patter against her bedroom window, out with the soft sigh of wind through the trees outside. Her body began to release tensions she hadn't even realized she was carrying. The tightness in her shoulders from hunching over her computer, the clench in her jaw from a difficult conversation earlier that day, the knot in her stomach from worrying about things that might never happen. The rain seemed to understand exactly what she needed, creating a natural white noise that masked the small sounds that usually kept her alert. The neighbor's television, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing by. Instead of fighting these sounds or trying to block them out, Sarah found herself letting them become part of the evening's gentle symphony. She thought about all the people in the village who were probably experiencing the same thing right now, the gradual slowing of thoughts, the gentle loosening of muscles, the natural progression from wakefulness into the preliminary stages of sleep. There was something comforting about being part of this collective journey toward rest, knowing that she wasn't alone in her need for peace and renewal. The rain continued its patient work, washing the day's dust from the world outside, while simultaneously washing away the mental residue that had been accumulating in Sarah's mind. She found herself thinking not about tomorrow's tasks or yesterday's regrets, but about the simple pleasure of being warm and dry while the storm performed its ancient dance outside her window. Her thoughts began to take on the fluid quality of dreams, moving from one gentle image to another without the usual logical connections that characterized her waking mind. She saw herself as a child, standing at her grandmother's window during a similar storm, feeling completely safe and protected while the rain transformed the ordinary world into something magical and mysterious. The memory blended seamlessly with the present moment, creating a sense of continuity that felt deeply satisfying. The little girl who had once found comfort in her grandmother's stories was still there, still capable of wonder, still able to find peace in the simple act of listening to rain against glass. As Sarah's breathing deepened and her conscious mind began to fade into the background, she became aware of something she had never noticed before. The way her heartbeat seemed to echo the rhythm of the rain, creating a perfect synchronization between her inner world and the storm outside. It was as if her body was remembering something ancient and essential, a connection to natural cycles that modern life had taught her to ignore. The last thing she remembered thinking was how grateful she felt, not just for the rain and the approaching sleep, but for the rediscovery of something she had lost without realizing it. The ability to rest, to trust, to let go of control, and allow the natural rhythms of the night to carry her safely into dreams. In that moment between waking and sleeping, Sarah understood what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all those years ago. Rest wasn't a luxury or an indulgence. It was a birthright, as natural and necessary as the rain that nourished the earth. And tonight, finally, she was ready to claim it. The rain continued its gentle percussion against her window, but Sarah no longer heard it as separate from herself. Instead, it had become part of her own internal rhythm, a lullaby that her body recognized at the deepest level. Her breathing slowed, her muscles softened, and her mind began its journey into the healing darkness of sleep. Somewhere across town, Elena's clock chimed midnight, its gentle tones mixing with the sound of rain and wind to create a moment of perfect peace. And in that moment, Sarah joined the countless others who had discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures happen not when we're trying to stay awake, but when we finally allow ourselves to fall asleep. The rain whispered its ancient promises of rest, of renewal, of the infinite possibility that comes with each new dawn. And Sarah, at last, was ready to listen. As the midnight hour settled over the village like a gentle blanket, the rain began to weave its final spell of the evening. Each drop that touched the earth carried with it the accumulated wisdom of clouds that had traveled across continents, gathering stories from mountains and valleys, from forests and meadows, from all the places where people just like you had found solace in the sound of falling water. In her apartment above the baker's shop, Sarah had discovered something profound about the nature of surrender. As her breathing synchronized with the rain's rhythm, she began to understand that sleep wasn't something to be achieved through effort, but something to be allowed through acceptance. The harder she had tried to force rest in the past, the more elusive it had become. But tonight, by simply listening to the rain's patient teaching, she had found the key that had been waiting for her all along. The storm outside continued its ancient work, transforming the village into something from a fairy tale. Street lamps became islands of warm light in the darkness, their glow diffused by the falling rain into soft halos that seemed to pulse with their own gentle heartbeat. The cobblestones that had been worn smooth by centuries of footsteps now reflected the dancing light, creating a mosaic of liquid silver that shifted and changed with each gust of wind. In houses throughout the village, others were experiencing their own journeys toward rest. The elderly gentleman who visited Elena's shop each week was lying in his bed, listening to the rain against his window and thinking about his late wife, how she used to say that rainy nights were when the angels were watering heaven's garden. The thought no longer brought him sadness, but rather a deep sense of connection to something larger than himself. Chen, who had struggled with sleep since her husband's passing, found herself for the first time in months not fighting the silence in her bedroom. Instead, she was allowing the rain to fill that space with its gentle presence, creating a cocoon of sound that felt almost like companionship. Her breathing began to slow as she realized that she didn't have to carry her grief alone. The rain was carrying it with her, washing away the sharp edges of loss and leaving behind something softer, more manageable. Young Thomas, whose mind usually raced with worries about school and friendships, discovered that the rain had a magical ability to slow down his thoughts. Each worry that arose seemed to dissolve as quickly as it formed, washed away by the steady rhythm outside his window. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's test or yesterday's embarrassment. He was simply existing in the present moment, safe and warm in his bed, while the storm protected him from the outside world. The rain understood something that human beings often forget, that rest is not a reward for productivity, but a fundamental need that requires no justification. It doesn't matter how much you accomplished today or how much you plan to do tomorrow. The night offers its gifts freely, without conditions, asking only that you receive them with an open heart. As the storm intensified, it began to reveal one of its most profound secrets. The sound of rain isn't just pleasant background noise. It's actually a form of natural meditation, a way of focusing the mind on something simple and repetitive until all other thoughts fade into the background. Scientists call this entrainment, the way external rhythms can influence internal states, but poets and dreamers have always known it simply as the magic of letting go. Elena, still in her workshop despite the late hour, was experiencing this magic firsthand. As she listened to the rain on her tin roof, she found herself naturally breathing in rhythm with the storm. Her hands moved over her latest creation with a fluid grace that seemed to come from somewhere beyond conscious thought. She was no longer trying to perfect the clock's mechanism. She was allowing it to perfect itself, guided by the same natural wisdom that governed the rain's patient fall. The clock seemed to respond to this change in her approach, its internal mechanisms aligning themselves with a precision that surprised even its creator. The gentle chimes that marked each hour now seemed to emerge not from metal and wood, but from the very air itself, as if the clock had learned to speak the rain's language of peace and tranquility. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation was happening in Sarah's apartment, where the young woman who had spent so many nights fighting sleep was finally learning to welcome it. As she lay in her bed, listening to the rain paint patterns on her window, she began to understand that her insomnia had never been about an inability to sleep. It had been about an inability to trust. Trust that the world would continue to turn while she rested. Trust that tomorrow's problems would still be solvable after a night of peace. Trust that she deserved the gift of rest, regardless of how productive she had been or how much she had accomplished. The rain was teaching her that rest wasn't something to be earned, but something to be received like grace itself. As the night deepened, the rain began to work its transformation on the village itself. The busy streets that had been filled with the urgent energy of daytime commerce now lay quiet and peaceful, washed clean by the storm's patient attention. The harsh edges of buildings were softened by the rain's gentle touch, creating a world that felt more like a painting than a place where people lived and worked. The rain collected in puddles that reflected the night sky, creating portals to other worlds where stars danced in liquid mirrors. It ran in small rivers along the gutters, carrying with it the day's accumulated dust and debris, leaving everything fresh and renewed. Even the air itself seemed cleaner, charged with the negative ions that storms create, the same ions that make people feel more relaxed and peaceful. In her bed, Sarah was beginning to experience what sleep researchers call the hypnagogic state, that mysterious realm between waking and sleeping, where the ordinary rules of consciousness begin to dissolve. Her thoughts were becoming more fluid, more dreamlike, moving from one gentle image to another without the usual logical connections that characterized her waking mind. She found herself remembering things she hadn't thought about in years. The feeling of being small and safe in her grandmother's arms, the sound of her mother humming while she did housework, the way sunlight used to stream through her childhood bedroom window on lazy Saturday mornings. These memories weren't coming to her as separate recollections, but as part of a continuous stream of comfort and safety that seemed to flow directly from the rain outside. The storm was doing more than just providing pleasant background noise. It was actually helping to reorganize her neural pathways, creating new connections between the parts of her brain responsible for rest and relaxation. Each drop that hit her window was like a gentle massage for her nervous system, gradually shifting her from the sympathetic state of alertness into the parasympathetic state of peace. As Sarah's breathing deepened and her muscles continued to relax, she became aware of something extraordinary happening. The boundary between herself and the rain was beginning to dissolve. She was no longer a person listening to a storm. She was becoming part of the storm itself, part of the vast cycle of water and wind and renewal that had been playing out on Earth for millions of years. This wasn't just a poetic metaphor. It was a genuine shift in consciousness, the kind that happens when the mind finally stops trying to control and starts allowing itself to be carried by forces larger than itself. Sarah was experiencing what mystics and meditation teachers have described for centuries: the dissolution of the ego, the temporary release from the burden of being a separate self. The rain continued its work throughout the village, creating a collective experience of peace and tranquility that seemed to connect everyone in invisible threads of shared calm. In houses and apartments, in the clockmaker's workshop, and the baker's rooms above his shop, people were finding their way to rest through the storm's gentle guidance. Some were already deep in sleep, their breathing slow and regular, their bodies completely relaxed for the first time in days or weeks. Others were still in the process of letting go, feeling the day's tensions gradually dissolve under the rain's patient influence. And a few, like Sarah, were discovering that the journey towards sleep could be as beautiful and meaningful as sleep itself. The rain sang its ancient lullaby, the same song it had been singing since the first drops fell on the first earth. It was a song of patience and persistence, of the power of gentle repetition, of the way small actions repeated over time can create profound transformation. Each drop was insignificant by itself, but together they were reshaping the world, one gentle touch at a time. As the storm reached its crescendo, filling the night with the sound of water against glass, against leaves, against the earth itself, Sarah finally crossed the threshold from waking into sleep. Her last conscious thought was a feeling of profound gratitude, not just for the rain and the approaching rest, but for the rediscovery of something she had thought she had lost forever: the ability to trust, the capacity to let go, the wisdom to understand that sometimes the most important thing we can do is nothing at all, except allow ourselves to be carried by the natural rhythms that govern all life. The rain continued its gentle work throughout the night, washing the world clean, preparing it for tomorrow's possibilities, and carrying the village safely through the darkness toward dawn. And in the morning, when the storm had passed and the sun emerged to illuminate a world made fresh and new, the people would wake with the deep satisfaction that comes only from truly restorative sleep. But that is a story for another time. For now, let the rain carry you safely into dreams, trusting that you too are part of this ancient cycle of rest and renewal, this eternal dance of water and wind, and the promise of peace that comes with every midnight storm. The rain whispers its final blessing. Rest now, dear soul. Let go of all that weighs upon your heart. Tomorrow will bring its own gifts, but tonight belongs to dreams, to healing, to the gentle embrace of sleep that awaits you just beyond the next soft breath.